Keanu Reeves broke down on the road, but help came from a teenager in an old garage. The next day, the boy had a luxury SUV at home. Sign up and tell us where you're watching us from. The desert stretched endlessly under the bright afternoon sun, a vast expanse of beige dunes and rugged terrain that seemed to whisper of solitude. Keanu Reeves leaned forward slightly on his bike, the rumble of the engine a comforting companion against the stillness around him. The road ahead seemed infinite, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the barren landscape. For him, rides like these were moments of freedom, away from the cameras, the noise, and the expectations of a life lived in the public eye. He relished the feel of the wind brushing against his face, the mechanical hum of the engine vibrating through his hands. For years, motorcycles had been more than just a hobby. They were his solace, his connection to a simpler, purer sense of existence. But today, the pace of the ride began to falter. At first, it was subtle, a hesitation in the bike's rhythm. Keanu's brow furrowed as he adjusted the throttle, but the engine's response was uneven. A low sputter grew into an ominous stutter, and soon the bike began to lose power. He guided it carefully to the side of the road, coasting to a stop on the cracked and sun-scorched pavement. Stepping off, he assessed the situation. The bike looked fine on the surface, its polished frame gleaming under the sun. But the trouble was internal, mechanical, something beyond what he could quickly fix without tools. The reality of his isolation set in as he surveyed the desolate surroundings. No towns in sight, no gas stations, not even a car passing by. Just the relentless desert heat and an unbroken horizon. He checked his phone, but as expected, there was no signal. Sighing, he grabbed a water bottle from his pack and took a sip, weighing his options. It was then that he spotted something in the distance. A sign, weathered and faded, barely legible against the backdrop of the desert. Squinting, he made out the words, "Repairs. All problems solved." An arrow pointed toward a narrow, dusty path leading away from the main road. Hope stirred in him as he pushed his bike toward the path, its weight cumbersome under the relentless sun. The walk was grueling, each step a battle against the heat and the soft ground. Sweat trickled down his temple, soaking into his shirt, but determination kept him moving. Eventually, a structure emerged on the horizon, low and modest, blending into the dusty surroundings. The garage was a humble building, its once bright paint now chipped and dulled by years of desert winds. A hand-painted sign above the entrance bore the same promise as the roadside marker. Repairs, all problems solved. It felt both oddly reassuring and slightly dubious. As he approached, he noticed the faint sound of metal clinking against metal, a rhythmic, methodical noise that suggested someone was hard at work. Keanu pushed open the creaky door, stepping into the cool shadow of the garage. Inside, the air smelled of motor oil and grease, a familiar scent that brought with it a sense of nostalgia. Tools were scattered on a workbench, and shelves lined the walls, packed with parts and equipment. It was far from the sleek professional workshops he was used to, but it had its own charm, its own character. Then he saw him. A boy, no older than 14, crouched over a disassembled carburetor. The boy's hands moved with practiced precision, his brow furrowed in concentration. He wore a tattered shirt and jeans streaked with grease, his dark skin glistening slightly under the dim light of the workshop. He didn't seem to notice Keanu at first, too engrossed in his task. "Excuse me," Keanu said, his voice breaking the silence. The boy glanced up, startled at first, then quickly stood, wiping his hands on a rag. His expression shifted from surprise to a guarded politeness as he approached. "Need help?" the boy asked, his tone steady but wary. Keanu hesitated, taken in the sight of this young mechanic in the middle of nowhere. He wasn't expecting someone so young, or so alone, but the boy's confidence in his craft was evident, and in the absence of other options, Keanu decided to take a chance. "My bike broke down a few miles back," he explained. "Think you could take a look?" The boy nodded, stepping past him to peer out the door. "Bring it in, I'll see what I can do." Though he wasn't sure what to expect, something about the boy's quiet determination reassured Keanu. He pushed his bike into the workshop, watching as the boy immediately set to work, his movements deliberate and efficient. For the first time since his breakdown, Keanu felt a flicker of hope. He had found help in the most unexpected of places, and from the most unexpected of people. The dim light of the workshop cast long shadows as Keanu watched the boy move with a quiet efficiency that seemed almost unnatural for someone his age. Elijah, he had introduced himself briefly after Keanu brought the bike inside, was focused entirely on the task at hand. There was no hesitation in his movements as he ran his hands over the engine, examining it with a critical eye. His fingers were slender but strong, calloused in a way that spoke of years of manual work. Keanu stood back, unsure of what to say. He'd spent enough time around skilled mechanics to recognize talent, and Elijah's confidence, even in silence, was striking. Yet, the boy seemed too young, too small to carry the weight of a profession like this. Where were his parents? Why was he here, alone, in this forgotten corner of the desert? "Looks like it's the valve," Elijah said suddenly, his voice breaking the quiet hum of the room. He straightened, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead with the back of his hand. "It's worn out. Won't keep pressure." He spoke with the casual authority of someone who had diagnosed this kind of issue 100 times before. "You sure?" Keanu asked, more out of curiosity than doubt. Elijah glanced at him, a flicker of amusement in his dark eyes. "Pretty sure. You'd be surprised how often this happens with older models like yours. I can fix it, but I'll need a bit of time." "Time I've got," Keanu replied, pulling up a dusty stool. He leaned back, crossing his arms as he watched the boy gather tools. A quiet clink of metal against metal filled the air again. Elijah's workspace was surprisingly well organized, given the cluttered state of the garage. Wrenches, screwdrivers, and other tools hung neatly on a pegboard above the workbench. Containers, labeled with handwritten tags, lined the shelves, each filled with carefully sorted nuts, bolts, and spare parts. Despite the evident age of the tools and the wear on the furniture, there was an undeniable sense of care and pride in how everything was arranged. As Elijah worked, Keanu's eyes wandered to a small table near the back of the room. On it sat a faded photograph in a wooden frame. It showed a smiling woman, her arms wrapped around two children, one of whom was unmistakably Elijah, albeit younger and rounder-cheeked. The other child was a girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with bright eyes and a toothy grin. Elijah noticed Keanu's gaze and paused, his hands hovering over the bike's engine. "That's my mom and sister," he said quietly. There was no hesitation in his voice, but there was something guarded, a wall being raised before Keanu could ask too much. "Where are they?" Keanu asked, keeping his tone light, careful not to push. "My mom's at work. She works a double shift at the diner in town. And my sister," Elijah hesitated, then shrugged. "She's at school." Keanu nodded, sensing the boy wasn't ready to share more. He turned his attention back to the bike, watching as Elijah removed the faulty valve with careful precision. "Where'd you learn to do all this?" Keanu asked after a long moment. "My dad," Elijah replied, his voice softening. "He taught me everything before. Well, before he wasn't around anymore." He paused, tightening a bolt. This was his garage. He built it from scratch. Said it was his way of helping people. "I guess I'm just trying to keep it going." The weight of Elijah's words hung in the air, heavy and poignant. Keanu felt a pang of empathy for the boy, who seemed to carry so much responsibility on his young shoulders. It wasn't hard to imagine the struggles Elijah and his family faced, trying to survive in a place so remote, with so little support. "And you run this place all by yourself?" Keanu asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Elijah nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah. It's not like I get a lot of customers, just travelers passing through mostly. People like you." "People like me," Keanu echoed, his tone thoughtful. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees as he studied the boy. "You ever think about leaving? Going somewhere else?" Elijah didn't answer right away. Instead, he focused on his work, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, "Sometimes. But this is home. My mom needs me here. And my sister." His voice trailed off and he shrugged again. "Anyway, it's not so bad. I like fixing things." There was something deeply humbling about Elijah's resilience, his quiet acceptance of a life that most people would consider too hard, too unfair. Keanu felt an odd sense of admiration for the boy, as well as a growing curiosity about what the future might hold for someone so determined, so talented. As Elijah tightened the last bolt and wiped his hands on a rag, he looked up at Keanu with a satisfied smile. "That should do it. Want to give it a try?" Keanu nodded, standing and walking over to the bike. He climbed on, turned the key, and pressed the ignition. The engine roared to life, smooth and steady, its familiar hum filling the garage. He couldn't help but grin as he looked back at Elijah. "Impressive," he said, his voice sincere. Elijah shrugged, but his smile widened. "Told you I could fix it?" For the first time since he'd walked into the garage, Keanu felt a sense of relief. But more than that, he felt an inexplicable connection to this boy, this young mechanic with a world of potential and a life full of challenges. And though he didn't know it yet, that connection would change both their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. The roar of the engine filled the garage, its steady hum a testament to Elijah's skill. Keanu leaned forward slightly, letting the vibrations of the bike settle into a familiar rhythm. He couldn't help but smile, impressed by how effortlessly the boy had resolved the problem. Elijah stood nearby, arms crossed, his expression a mixture of pride and humility. "That's some serious talent," Keanu said as he dismounted the bike, turning to face the young mechanic. "How long have you been doing this?" Elijah shrugged, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. "Since I was a kid. My dad used to let me help him out around here. He'd say, the sooner you learn to fix things, the less you'll ever feel broken." His voice carried a faint trace of nostalgia, though he spoke matter-of-factly, as if he had long since grown used to the weight of his circumstances. Keanu nodded thoughtfully, glancing around the garage. The space was modest but functional, filled with the tools of a trade that clearly demanded precision and care. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with jars of bolts and screws, spare parts organized in a system only Elijah seemed to understand. The air smelled of oil and metal, a scent that carried a strange sense of comfort. On the far wall, something caught Keanu's eye. It was a wooden board, old and scratched, but carefully maintained. On it were pinned several photos and notes. He stepped closer, studying the display. One photo showed Elijah, younger and beaming, holding up a wrench almost as big as his arm. Beside him stood a tall man with kind eyes and a broad smile. His father, no doubt. Another picture was of Elijah's mother and sister, their faces lit with warmth and joy. A few handwritten notes were tucked among the photos, lists of parts, reminders to reorder supplies. "This was all your dad's, wasn't it?" Keanu asked, gesturing to the board. Elijah nodded, his expression softening. "Yeah. He built this place from nothing. Said it wasn't about making money. It was about helping people. Travelers, folks from town, anyone who needed it. He believed in doing good, no matter how small." Keanu's gaze lingered on the photos. "Sounds like he was a great man." "He was," Elijah said simply, his voice quieter now. "When he passed, it was tough. But I couldn't let this place go. It's all we've got." The boy's words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Keanu could feel the depth of Elijah's dedication, the quiet strength it took to keep this garage running. It was a burden no child should have to bear, and yet Elijah carried it with remarkable grace. "You're keeping his legacy alive," Keanu said, his tone earnest. "That's no small thing." Elijah looked away, his cheeks darkening slightly under the praise. "I just do what I can." Changing the subject, Elijah moved to a workbench and began organizing his tools, his hands working methodically. "So, you ride a lot?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder at Keanu. "Whenever I can," Keanu replied, leaning casually against a nearby shelf. "It's my way of getting away from everything. Clears my head." Elijah nodded, seeming to understand. "I get that. Working here is kind of the same for me. When I'm fixing something, it's like nothing else matters. It's just me and the machine." The simplicity of Elijah's perspective struck Keanu. For someone so young, the boy had a clarity of purpose that many adults would envy. There was no bitterness in his words, no resentment for the life he had been dealt. Instead, there was a quiet resilience, a determination to find meaning in the work he did. As Keanu watched Elijah, he couldn't shake the feeling that this boy was destined for something greater. The skill, the passion, the unwavering commitment. They were all there, waiting to be nurtured. But in this remote garage, far from the opportunities that could help him grow, Elijah's potential seemed trapped. "You ever think about doing more with this?" Keanu asked suddenly, a thought slipping out before he could stop himself. Elijah paused, turning to face him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're clearly talented. Have you ever thought about going to school for this? Learning from professionals, working with bigger teams?" Elijah hesitated, his expression guarded. "I've thought about it," he admitted. "But it's not that simple. My mom needs me here, and we don't have the money for things like that." Keanu nodded, understanding the reality of Elijah's situation. But the thought lingered in his mind. How could someone like this be left unnoticed, unrecognized, when their potential was so obvious? As if sensing the shift in the conversation, Elijah changed the subject. "Your bike's good to go," he said, gesturing to the now repaired machine. "Just keep an eye on the valve. It's an older model, so it might need more maintenance down the line." Keanu smiled, appreciating the boy's professionalism. "I'll keep that in mind," he said. "Thanks, Elijah." The boy nodded, his expression softening into a small, genuine smile. "No problem, just doing my job." But as Keanu prepared to leave, the image of Elijah, this young, talented mechanic working tirelessly in his father's garage, stayed with him. There was something extraordinary about the boy. something that deserved to be seen, nurtured, and celebrated. And though he didn't yet know how, Keanu felt a growing determination to help Elijah find the opportunities he so clearly deserved. Keanu lingered in the garage longer than he intended, unable to shake the impression Elijah had left on him. The boy's quiet determination, his skill, and the weight of the responsibilities he carried at such a young age stirred something deep within. As Elijah moved around the garage, tidying up after the repair, Keanu found himself compelled to learn more about this remarkable young man and the life he led. "Your dad must have been an incredible guy," Keanu said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Elijah glanced up from a toolbox he was organizing, his expression softening. He could fix anything. Cars, bikes, even appliances sometimes. People from all over would come here because they knew he'd figure it out. He used to say, "Every machine has a soul, and every soul deserves a chance to work again." Elijah smiled faintly, as if hearing the echo of his father's voice in his mind. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "And your mom? She must be proud of how you've kept this place going." Elijah's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of something more complicated. Fatigue, perhaps, or the weight of unspoken struggles. "She is," he said after a pause, "but it's hard. She works at the diner in town, double shifts most days, keeps saying she wants to quit, but we can't really afford that." "Does she ever get any time off?" Keanu asked. Elijah shook his head. "Not much. She used to, when Dad was around. He made sure we always had Sundays together, no matter what. We'd have pancakes for breakfast, go for a drive, maybe stop by the park. But now," he trailed off, his voice heavy with resignation. "Now, it's just about getting by." Keanu's chest tightened. He could see the exhaustion in the boy's posture, the maturity in his words that came from shouldering too much responsibility too soon. Elijah wasn't just a kid keeping a garage afloat. He was the glue holding his family together. "What about your sister?" Keanu asked, his tone gentle. Elijah's face brightened slightly. "Maya, she's not smart too. Always asking questions, always wanting to learn. She loves school, but she's always worried about Mom. Sometimes she'll stay up late to wait for her to come home, just to make sure she's okay." He chuckled softly. "She even tries to help me here sometimes, but I tell her to focus on her homework. I don't want her worrying about this stuff." Keanu leaned against a nearby workbench, crossing his arms as he absorbed the boy's words. There was so much love in the way Elijah spoke about his family, so much devotion. But there was also a clear sense of sacrifice, a willingness to put his own dreams and desires aside to ensure his mother and sister were taken care of. "You've taken on a lot for someone your age," Keanu said carefully. "Don't you ever feel overwhelmed?" Elijah hesitated, his hand stilling as he thought about the question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But what choice do I have? This is my family. If I don't step up, who will?" The simplicity of his answer struck Keanu. There was no self-pity in Elijah's voice, no resentment, just an unwavering sense of duty. It was both inspiring and heartbreaking. "Your dad must be proud of you," Keanu said softly. Elijah's lips quirked into a bittersweet smile. "I hope so. I try to do things the way he would have. Treat people right. Help when I can. It's what he taught me." For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the weight of the conversation settling over the room. Keanu felt a deep respect for Elijah, not just for his talent but for his character, for the way he carried himself, for the strength he showed in the face of challenges that would break most adults. Have you ever thought about what you'd do if things were different? Keanu asked after a while. If you didn't have to worry about the garage or the money. Elijah tilted his head, considering the question. I don't know. I guess I'd like to learn more about mechanics, go to school for it maybe. I've read about these big shops where they work on custom cars and bikes, where they design everything from scratch. That sounds amazing. He smiled wistfully. But that's just a dream. Keanu's heart ached at the boy's words. He could see how much Elijah wanted more, how much potential he had, but he could also see the barriers in his way, the financial struggles, the responsibility to his family, the sheer weight of circumstance. It's a good dream, Keanu said firmly, and you've got the talent to make it happen. Elijah shrugged, his expression guarded. Maybe, but right now I've got to focus on what's in front of me. The pragmatism in the boy's voice was admirable, but it also highlighted just how much he had sacrificed. Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that someone needed to step in, to give Elijah the opportunities he deserved. But he also knew that the boy's pride and independence wouldn't allow him to simply accept charity. As the conversation wound down, Keanu felt a renewed sense of determination. Elijah's story wasn't just one of hardship, it was one of resilience, of love, of a young man doing everything he could to honor his father's legacy and support his family. And while Keanu wasn't sure how yet, he knew he had to find a way to help. For now, though, he simply nodded, offering the boy a small smile. You're doing an incredible job, Elijah. Don't ever doubt that. Elijah met his gaze, his expression softening. Thanks. That means a lot. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and Keanu felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was just the beginning of something bigger, something that could change Elijah's life in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The soft hum of the freshly repaired motorcycle filled the garage as Keanu tested the throttle one last time. The engine purred smoothly, its earlier issues resolved with a precision that belied Elijah's young age. The boy stood off to the side, his arms crossed casually, watching with a mixture of satisfaction and humility. You've got some serious talent, Keanu said, turning off the bike and stepping off. I've been to plenty of professional shops, and they don't always get it right this quickly. Elijah shrugged, though a faint smile tugged at his lips. Just doing what I know. Glad it worked out. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out his wallet. He had no doubt Elijah's work was worth more than he could probably afford to charge, especially considering the effort and care he had put into the repair. But as he pulled out a stack of bills, Elijah shook his head. You don't have to pay, the boy said firmly. My dad always said it's not about the money. It's about helping people. And you seemed like you needed help. Keanu paused, taken aback by the boy's sincerity. Elijah, your work deserves to be paid for. This isn't just about the repair, it's about recognizing your skill. Elijah hesitated, his expression conflicted. It's not that I don't need the money, he admitted. But it feels wrong, charging you for something I could do so easily. Keanu smiled at the boy's humility, but he wasn't about to leave without compensating him. He placed the cash on the workbench, tucking it under a wrench so it wouldn't blow away in the faint desert breeze drifting through the garage. Consider it a donation to the garage, he said lightly. Use it to get more tools, parts, whatever you need. Elijah opened his mouth to protest, but Keanu held up a hand, silencing him. Think of it this way. Your dad believed in helping people, right? Well, this is my way of helping you. Let me do that. The boy hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "All right. Thanks, I guess." "It's not a guess," Keanu replied with a grin. "It's a fact." As Elijah busied himself tidying the workbench, Keanu walked to the doorway, taking in the vast expanse of the desert beyond. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. It was almost time to leave, but something about this place, about this boy, made him hesitate. There was so much potential here, so much untapped talent and resilience, but it was trapped, confined by circumstance. Keanu turned back to Elijah. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked, his tone casual. Elijah looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "For you, for the garage, for your family. What do you see when you think about the future?" The boy frowned, clearly not used to being asked such a question. "I don't know," he admitted. "I guess I just focus on what's in front of me. Fixing what's broken. Making sure Mom and Maya are okay." "That's important," Keanu said. "But don't forget about yourself in the process. You've got something special, Elijah. And I don't just mean your skills. You've got heart. Drive. That's rare. Don't let it go to waste." Elijah's expression softened, but he didn't respond right away. Instead, he fiddled with the wrench, his eyes downcast. "It's not that simple," he said finally. "There's always something to fix. Always something to take care of. I can't just leave." Keanu nodded, understanding the boy's perspective, but unwilling to let the conversation end on such a note. "Maybe you don't have to leave," he said thoughtfully, "but that doesn't mean you can't grow. There's a whole world out there, Elijah. Opportunities that can help you make this garage even better. Help your family in ways you haven't even thought of yet." Elijah glanced up at him, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Like what?" Keanu hesitated. He didn't have an answer yet, but the seed of an idea was beginning to take root. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm going to figure it out." Elijah's brow furrowed. "Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." Keanu smiled, his voice quiet but firm. "Because I see something in you, Elijah, and I think the world needs to see it too." The boy didn't respond, but his gaze lingered on Keanu, as if trying to gauge the sincerity of his words. Finally, he nodded, a small but genuine smile crossing his face. "Thanks," he said simply. Keanu returned the smile, feeling a sense of connection that was rare and profound. This wasn't just about fixing a bike. It was about helping someone who deserved a chance to thrive. As he mounted his motorcycle, Elijah walked to the door, watching him with an expression that was equal parts gratitude and curiosity. "Take care out there," the boy said. "You too," Keanu replied, revving the engine. "And keep an eye out. You never know what's coming your way." With that, he pulled out onto the road, a desert wind rushing past him as he left the garage behind. But, as the miles stretched ahead, he couldn't stop thinking about Elijah and the life he was leading. There had to be a way to help, a way to make sure the boy's talent didn't go unnoticed. The road blurred into the horizon, but Keanu's thoughts stayed firmly rooted in the dusty little garage, and the extraordinary boy who had repaired not just his bike, but something deeper within him. The desert road stretched endlessly before Keanu, but his mind wasn't on the ride. His thoughts were consumed by the boy he had just left behind. Elijah's story lingered with him. The quiet resilience, the unwavering dedication to his family, and the raw talent that seemed almost wasted in that dusty garage. As the wind roared past him, Keanu felt a growing determination. He couldn't just walk away from this. Later that evening, In the comfort of his hotel room, Keanu sat at the small desk by the window, his laptop open before him. The words flowed easily, almost instinctively, as he typed out a post for his social media. It wasn't something he did often, sharing personal encounters with his millions of followers, but this felt different. Elijah's story wasn't just about a bike repair. It was a reminder of how much strength and potential could exist in unexpected places. He began the post with a simple introduction. Today, on a deserted stretch of highway, my motorcycle broke down. But what could have been a frustrating day turned into an inspiring one because of a boy named Elijah. Keanu described the encounter in vivid detail. The old garage, Elijah's quiet confidence, the skill with which he diagnosed and repaired the bike, and the depth of his devotion to his family. He didn't romanticize the boy's struggles, but instead focused on his resilience and the remarkable character he had shown. "I see so much potential in Elijah," he wrote. "He's a young man with incredible talent and a heart full of determination. But, like so many others, he's facing challenges that could limit what he's capable of achieving. I believe we can change that." He concluded the post with a call to action, encouraging his followers to share the story and suggesting that anyone interested in supporting Elijah, whether through mentorship, donations, or opportunities, reach out. He attached a photo of the garage he had taken before leaving, the weathered building with its hand-painted sign, a testament to the hard work and dreams it represented. After rereading the post, Keanu hesitated for only a moment before hitting publish. The response was almost immediate. Within hours, the story began to spread. Comments flooded in, thousands of them from people moved by Elijah's story. Some shared their own experiences of struggling to balance family responsibilities with pursuing their dreams. Others offered words of encouragement, expressing admiration for Elijah's character and determination. And then there were those who wanted to help. "I'm a mechanic with a shop in Arizona." One comment read, "I'd be happy to mentor Elijah if he's ever interested. I run a foundation that supports young talent in technical trades." Another wrote, "We'd love to sponsor Elijah for formal training." The post quickly gained traction, shared across platforms and news outlets. Keanu's inbox filled with messages from people eager to contribute. Some offered financial support, while others proposed to send in tools and supplies to the garage. A few companies even reached out, expressing interest in helping modernize Elijah's workshop or offering him internships. Keanu spent the next several days sorting through the messages, amazed by the outpouring of generosity. It wasn't just about the money or the opportunities, it was the way people connected to Elijah's story, seeing in him a reflection of their own struggles, hopes, and dreams. One night, as he scrolled through the countless messages, an idea began to take shape. This wasn't just about providing temporary assistance, it was about creating a lasting impact. Elijah didn't just need a one-time donation, he needed resources and opportunities that would empower him to build a better future. For himself, his family, and the garage he had worked so hard to preserve. Keanu reached out to a few trusted friends in the industry, people who shared his belief in the importance of mentorship and community. Together, they began brainstorming ways to support Elijah in a meaningful way. They discussed setting up a scholarship fund for his education, arranging for professionals to visit the garage and teach him advanced techniques, and even organizing a fundraiser to help his family with their financial struggles. Meanwhile, the story continued to spread. Media outlets picked it up, turning Elijah into an unlikely symbol of resilience and hope. People from all walks of life reached out, inspired by the boy who had reminded them of the power of determination and kindness. Through it all, Keanu remained in close contact with Elijah. He called the boy regularly, updating him on the progress being made and ensuring that every decision was made with his input. At first, Elijah was overwhelmed by the attention and hesitant to accept the help. But, as Keanu gently reminded him, this wasn't just about him. It was about honoring his father's legacy and creating a better future for his family. "You don't have to do this alone," Keanu told him during one of their calls. "There are people out there who believe in you, Elijah. Let them show you what you're capable of." The boy's silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. When he finally responded, his voice was thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Keanu replied. "Just keep being you." As the days turned into weeks, the pieces began to fall into place. A company donated state-of-the-art tools to the garage, while a local foundation offered to cover the cost of Maya's school supplies and meals. Elijah's mother was able to cut back on her work hours, giving her more time to spend with her children. And for the first time in a long time, Elijah allowed himself to think about the future, not as an impossible dream, but as something within reach. Through it all, Keanu couldn't help but marvel at the ripple effect of one small act of kindness. What had started as a chance encounter on a desert road had grown into something far greater, a testament to the power of community and the belief that even the smallest spark could ignite a flame. And as the support continued to pour in, one thing became clear. Elijah's story was far from over. It was just beginning. Elijah sat on the worn stool by the workbench, staring at the array of new tools laid out before him. Each item gleamed under the soft light of the garage, a stark contrast to the rusted and battered equipment he had grown up using. A set of precision wrenches, a high-quality torque tool, and even a digital diagnostic scanner, all donated by strangers who had read about his story. He still couldn't quite believe it. Just weeks ago, his world had been the same as always, a cycle of work, school for Maya, and his mother's exhausting shifts at the diner. Now, everything felt different. It wasn't just the tools or the upgraded equipment, though those were incredible. It was the feeling that, for the first time, he wasn't alone. The changes had begun gradually. A delivery truck arrived one morning, bringing boxes of supplies labeled with the names of companies he had only read about in magazines. Then came the visits. Local mechanics who stopped by to shake his hand and offer advice. Teachers from a nearby trade school who invited him to tour their facilities. Each interaction left him both humbled and inspired. Most importantly, the weight on his family had started to lift. His mother, Carmen, no longer came home looking completely drained. With some of the funds raised from Keanu's post, she had been able to reduce her hours at the diner, finally giving her time to rest and spend evenings with Maya. The little girl's face now lit up when her mother walked through the door, her drawings and homework ready to show off. Elijah couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and disbelief at how much things had changed. The garage itself had transformed too. New shelves replaced the sagging ones, organized with neatly labeled bins of parts. The peel-and paint on the walls was covered with a fresh coat of vibrant blue, and a local artist had even painted a mural outside, an image of a motorcycle engine with the words, "Where hearts and machines are fixed." Despite all the positive changes, Elijah found it hard to accept attention. People treated him like a hero, but he didn't feel like one. He was just doing what he always had, fixing things, helping his family, keeping the garage running. The sudden spotlight was overwhelming, and he wasn't sure how to navigate it. One evening, as he was tightening a bolt on a customer's engine, his phone buzzed. He wiped his hands on his rag and checked the screen. It was a video call from Keanu. Over the past few weeks, they had developed an easy rapport, with Keanu checking in regularly to see how things were going. "Hey, Elijah," Keanu said, his familiar warm smile appearing on the screen. "Hey," Elijah replied, setting the phone on the workbench so he could keep working while they talked. "What's up?" "Just wanted to see how you're holding up," Keanu said. "I saw the mural on the garage. Looks amazing." Elijah glanced toward the open door, where the mural was visible even in the fading light. "Yeah, it's pretty cool. People have been stopping by just to take pictures of it." "Not surprised," Keanu said. "You've become a bit of a local celebrity." Elijah chuckled, shaking his head. "I don't know about that. I'm just a kid fixing bikes." "You're more than that, Elijah," Keanu said, his tone serious. "You're someone who's inspired people, reminded them that hard work and heart still matter. That's not something everyone can do." The boy paused, letting the words sink in. He wasn't used to compliments like this, and he wasn't sure how to respond. "I guess," he said finally, "it's just weird. I didn't do anything special." Keanu's voice softened. "You did what a lot of people wouldn't. You stepped up when things got tough. You kept going when it would have been easier to give up. That's special, Elijah. Don't forget it." The boy nodded, his throat tightening slightly. He quickly turned his focus back to the engine, hoping to hide the emotion that threatened to surface. "Anyway," Keanu continued, "I've got some news for you. A friend of mine runs a trade school in California. They've heard about you, and they're offering you a full scholarship." Elijah froze, the wrench slipping from his fingers. "A scholarship," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yep," Keanu said, grinning. "They'll cover everything. Tuition, housing, even travel expenses. You'll get to learn from some of the best mechanics in the country." For a moment, Elijah couldn't speak. The idea of going to a school like that, of learning more about the craft he loved, felt like an impossible dream. But then, reality set in, and his shoulders sagged. "I can't," he said quietly. "I can't leave my mom and Maya. They need me here." "I figured you'd say that," Keanu said, his tone understanding. "But hear me out. This isn't about leaving them behind. It's about building a better future. For all of you. You'll be gone for a while, sure. But think about what you could bring back. The skills, the knowledge, the opportunities. You could take this garage to the next level." Elijah bit his lip, his mind racing. He wanted to believe it was possible, but the thought of being away from his family terrified him. "What if something happens while I'm gone?" "They'll have support," Keanu assured him. "Between the community here and the connections we've made, they'll be okay. And you can call them every day, visit during breaks. You're not abandoning them, Elijah. You're investing in their future, and yours." The boy stared at the phone, torn between fear and hope. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." "That's all I ask," Keanu said with a smile. "Take your time, but remember, you're not alone in this anymore." As the call ended, Elijah sat in the quiet of the garage, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He looked around at the space he had worked so hard to preserve, at the photos of his family on the wall, at the tools that represented both his past and his potential. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a different future. A future where he wasn't just fixing bikes in a small-town garage, but creating something bigger. Something that could truly honor his father's legacy and give his family the life they deserved. And as the evening settled into night, a spark of determination began to take root. Maybe, just maybe, he could make it work. The desert wind was cooler now, brushing gently against the freshly painted walls of the garage. The once faded building had been transformed, standing as a symbol of hope and resilience. A small sign hung in the window, "Closed today." Inside, Elijah was pacing, his nerves evident in the way he ran his hands over the edges of his workbench. Today wasn't like any other day. Keanu was coming back. The weeks since their last call had been a whirlwind of change. After much deliberation and several heartfelt conversations with his mother and Maya, Elijah had accepted the scholarship. It hadn't been an easy decision, but as Keanu had reminded him, it wasn't about leaving, it was about growing. He was set to leave in a month, and while the thought filled him with excitement, it also carried a tinge of anxiety. A familiar sound broke his thoughts, the low rumble of a motorcycle engine. Elijah rushed to the door, opening it just as Keanu's bike rolled to a stop. The actor dismounted with his usual understated confidence, a warm smile spreading across his face as he saw the boy waiting for him. "Hey, Elijah," Keanu greeted, pulling off his helmet. "The place looks incredible." Elijah grinned, his pride evident. "Thanks. It's been a lot of work, but everyone pitched in. Couldn't have done it without you." "Don't sell yourself short," Keanu said, clapping a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "This is your accomplishment. I just gave it a little push." The two stepped inside the garage, the scent of fresh paint mingling with the familiar smell of oil and grease. Elijah led Keanu around, showing off the new tools, the organized shelves, and the mural outside. Every detail told a story of transformation, not just of the space, but of the people who had worked to make it happen. As they reached the back of the garage where Elijah had set up a small office space, the boy turned to Keanu, his expression serious. "I don't know how to thank you for everything," he said quietly. "Not just for the tools or the scholarship, but for believing in me. It's changed everything." Keanu leaned against the doorframe, his smile softening. "You did the hard part, Elijah. You've got the talent, the drive, and the heart. All I did was make sure other people saw it too. And now, you're going to take it further than any of us imagined." The boy nodded, his determination clear. "I'm ready. I'm nervous, but I'm ready." "Good," Keanu said. "That's how you know it's worth it." They spent the rest of the day talking about Elijah's plans, about his family, about what lay ahead. Maya stopped by briefly, her boundless energy filling the room as she proudly showed Keanu a drawing she had made of the garage. Even Carmen joined them for a while, her gratitude evident in her warm smile and the way she fussed over both Elijah and Keanu. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the desert, Keanu and Elijah stepped outside. The air was crisp, the horizon painted in hues of orange and pink. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the day settling around them. "What do you see out there?" Keanu asked, nodding toward the horizon. Elijah thought for a moment before answering. "Possibility," he said finally. "A chance to do something more, to make things better." Keanu smiled, the answer exactly what he'd hoped for. That's the right way to look at it. The boy turned to him, his gaze steady. "Will you come back? When I'm done with school, I mean. When I've learned more and made this place better. Will you come see it?" "I wouldn't miss it," Keanu said. "This is just the beginning, Elijah. I want to see everything you're going to build." Elijah nodded, his chest swelling with determination. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a distant, unattainable dream. It felt real, tangible, something he could shape with his own hands. As Keanu mounted his bike, ready to head back to the road, he turned to Elijah one last time. "Take care of this place, and don't forget, you've got a lot of people rooting for you now." "I won't forget," Elijah said, his voice steady. "Thank you for everything." With the final wave, Keanu started his engine, the rumble filling the air as he rode off into the fading light. Elijah watched until the figure disappeared into the distance, the sound of the bike growing faint. Then he turned back to the garage, his heart full of hope and resolve. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time it didn't scare him. It inspired him. And as he stepped inside, the possibilities stretched out before him as vast and endless as the desert sky. Thank you for finishing this video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. Share this video with your friends. Maybe it will inspire them as much as it inspires you. And don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel to discover even more interesting things. See you soon.